one of the game changers of this approach, I'm always thinking about like what are we doing here that hopefully will make a difference for the future trajectory of Islam and for Muslims, right? And so we know how unsatisfying just the traditional or just the modern approach is. And I think by having now gone through even just Surah Baqarah alone, you've really demonstrated the power of this methodology and underscored the absolute necessity of, the intellect and the piety. I mean, you said in one of the sessions, you cannot be recognized as a true Islamic scholar or Quranic scholar unless you have both. It can't be just an intellectual engagement, but you have to have piety. And I think that that's a really bold statement that I don't think I've ever heard anywhere, and that I think most people would not necessarily admit to. But I believe that now, having demonstrated it and said that.
Well, in the current academia, it's suicide. I mean, in the current, the way that, and I often feel really bad for students, because I know that if they're beginning their career, and if they don't want to end up teaching in one of the ghetto Muslim institutions, because Muslim institutions are ghettos. They're nothing more than ghettos, and we just, the sooner we admit that and confront it, and the ostentatious affectations of trying to get affiliated to a university, that university, because I've been in these meetings and I know how academics talk about Muslim institutions behind their back, whether affiliated with Georgetown and they're in some Gulf country, or affiliated with Berkeley, or affiliated with I don't know what. Academic institutions respect you when you have thorough vetting processes, serious peer review, and publications, and your publications speak for themselves. But if you don't want to get stuck in the Muslim ghetto institutions, and you want to compete in the secular academic world, when it comes to especially Quranic studies, if you say I'm a believer, your chances of getting hired, go way down. And that makes it very, very difficult. An Ismail Farouqi or a Fazl al-Rahman, or, and even, they're unusual. And with the rise of Islamophobia, there was a period where discourses on pluralism made academic institutions rather shy about discriminating against Muslims. But with the rise of Islamophobia, I've noticed that academics have become far more emboldened about openly excluding insiders to the tradition who speak from normative commitments, loyal to the tradition. And this is, we fought in my own school. You know this very well. We fought a very, very vicious battle to keep Islamic studies open, because there were all types of parties that wanted to close Islamic studies under the guise that it was a place that preaches Islam, not teaches Islam. And eventually that battle was won by keeping Islamic studies open. And I was the chair of Islamic studies for, 10 years or whatever. But once I was gone, Islamic studies is still open, but the same thing about teaching versus preaching has come back. And, Yeah, I just often my heart goes out to Muslim students who want to cut a path in the academic world, and at the same time do not want to put on the pretenses of saying, I don't really belong to this tradition, and
I mean, it's an ongoing battle because you still confront a lot of these same issues today, even at the law school to an extent.
I mean, I'm nearing the end of my career, and so I
But I think people should know,
Yeah.
when you started this journey, I mean, there were very few, if any, Muslims in just as law students in law schools, and you were really pioneering in terms of being probably the first professor in a law school teaching Islamic law, because at that time it was so unusual and so difficult, and literally, I mean, being there, you know, he had to actually like meet with every single person on the law school faculty as part of a jihad to really teach people like why should Islamic law have a seat in a law school, right? And but my point being that in like even Surah Baqarah, like demonstrating this methodology, like I can't imagine approaching the Quran in any other way, like without the requisite intellect and piety. And I feel like having now displayed the vast difference in quality of understanding, our book, that this is a standard that we as Muslims now can point to and insist upon. And for young scholars who want to see an example of, an academic, a scholar who lived his entire academic career being very open about his commitment to his faith, it can be done and should be done. I mean, it's something that we obviously as Muslims need, as it exists in other faith traditions. It just obviously in the Jewish tradition, the Hindus, Chinese, Buddhists, like you've talked about scholars in those fields. They're all from within the tradition, but obviously in Islamic studies, that's not always the case.